Hello, it's Josh Bloom, and I am suffering as I podcast to you today because a heat wave has hit New York and I am too cheap to turn on the air conditioning, which means that you should feel bad for me and feel grateful and subscribe to my Substack because in the last few seconds I made you feel sufficiently guilty, which frankly lives up to the stereotype of a guy whose Substack is superjews.substack.com. But really, I am prepared to deal with the heat like a champ because I love challenges that involve human endurance as long as they don't require physical movement. This is episode number 36 of the Josh Bloom is Wiping Down the Back of His Neck Like an Imprisoned Gang Member podcast, also known as the Josh Bloom Podcast. It is the latest edition of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration, days 145 through 151. I updated you last week about the book I am writing about an indie rock band and its leader, and here's another update. I am still writing it. So I get to deal with this heat, this podcast, and this book. Thanks a lot. Oh, wait, it is my fault, except for the heat. But again, as a Jew, I probably can find a way to make it my fault. This week on the show, we talk about inventing ourselves, how that topic is related to the band R.E.M, and what that has to do with the two roads people seem to travel when they engage with me about ignoring the Trump administration. We move on to some sick stuff that I am partially regretting discussing, but it did lead me to mention Eddie Van Halen and the NAACP, so it can't be all that bad. We celebrate being 10% through 1,461 days of the Trump administration, why Father's Day reminds me of Michael Landon of Little House, and the success of the No King's Day protest, along with the parallel failure of the leader of the Trump administration's birthday parade. Speaking of No King's Day, a commenter named Jack gets all up in my grill about it, and I have to explain a few things to him while using Independence Day star and famous face slapper Will Smith as part of my argument. We discuss the 3.5% rule, why it is important to know about, and how it relates to the Daryl Hall and John Oates mild banger one-on-one. Speaking of bangers and calling back to last week's unfortunate passing of Brian Wilson, I mentioned the hit song Barbara Ann by the Beach Boys and how it is related to our upcoming war with Iran. Have you heard that we're probably going to war? Thanks, leader of the Trump administration. Finally, I make a plea for the gold leaf installed in the Oval Office to remain after the leader of the Trump administration is gone, just to show that we have more important issues to deal with. As usual, if you want to watch a compilation of all of this week's original TikTok posts, they are compiled in one video on YouTube. A link is in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and now let's get into 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration. I will be back afterwards. Day 145 of 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration. I am not a self-help guru. I am just trying to help myself. Do you want to find out how to invent yourself? Do you know what inventing yourself even means? How does one invent themselves? Well, let's invent. I don't have much to say today on day 145 for 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration, and that is the point. People have typically taken one of two roads when engaging with me during 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration, and one of those roads has been to express displeasure about how irresponsible it is of me to ignore the leader of the Trump Administration and the Trump Administration. They tell me I must be activated, I must protest, I must speak up and speak out. The others, which are the majority who engage with me about 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration, use special language to tell me about how I am not ignoring the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration, how I am unable to ignore the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration, and that I will not be able to ignore the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration. I respond to both of these types of comments and engagements with some variation of, no, I'm sorry. It is my life and I choose how to live it. And that is always going to be my message to you on a day when I don't really have anything to say, because it's not about saying anything. It is about looking around in silence at the beauty that surrounds us all. It's right outside your door. And if you're not a person who gets up and gets outside of that door, well, it is inside your door as well. It is inside your eyelids. You can live any kind of life you want to live. Michael Stipe of R.E.M. in a song that appears on their album Monster, which is not a popular R.E.M. album. In fact, on Reddit, someone asked, "Why do I always see the album Monster by R.E.M. in the used bin?" I personally enjoy the album Monster quite a bit, especially for the song entitled Crush with Eyeliner, which contains the lyric, "We all invent ourselves." And that is the case. The leader of the Trump administration can be out here acting like some authoritarian dictator when he was just some lucky dum-dum born on third base to a couple of people who I consider to be neglectful, privileged bigots. Then you can invent any version of yourself that you want to be. We are all here for a very short time, so invent the version of you that you see in your mind. And if you would be so kind, please start by ignoring the Trump administration. Day 146 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I am celebrating No King's Day, and I am just trying to help myself. Do you want to hear something disturbing? Stick around. I wish I could confidently say that the situation in America, where elected officials are gunned down in their homes in what appears to be a gift to the leader of the Trump administration on his birthday, I wish it will get better before it gets worse. But not only can I not say that, but I feel like I can more confidently say that it will get worse. Now, I was in a coffee shop this morning just writing, and there was a group who had gathered to sign people up as members of the NAACP to promote Juneteenth. Everyone was enjoying their Saturday. This town is not a wealthy town. This coffee shop is in a middle-class town with all sorts of people of all kinds of colors living their lives. And a few miles away, there was even a No Kings protest. So it's not like this town was not down. So again, in considering the state of the world entire, it isn't good. It probably will get worse, but considering, on the other hand, the local, as you want to be local people, have smiles on their faces and they're enjoying their lives and doing what they have to do to make the lives of other people better too. When I was growing up, on the wall in my home, even though I lived with two parents who were not very good at parenting, there was still a sensible sign on the wall that read, "One day at a time." It wasn't about the TV show One Day at a Time, although I really did love that TV show, and little did we know the stories of the two daughters on that show, one being Valerie Bertinelli, who would grow up to marry Eddie Van Halen, and the other being Mackenzie Phillips, who didn't get to grow up without marrying her own father. They didn't really get married, but according to her, she consensually behaved like she was his wife, if you know what I mean. Yikes. It said "one day at a time" on my wall, and I continue to live that way because one day, that 1 hour, that 1 minute, that is all we have. And you don't want to be spending that time paying too much attention to forces that you have no control over. The forces you have control over are the forces within you. So on this day, No King's Day, get out into the population and ignore the Trump administration. Day 147 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I am just trying to help myself. Don't you believe me? It is not often enough that I suggest a celebration, especially during such an uncertain time in our nation. Today, day 147 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration, is such a day for celebration. You might ask me, "Josh, what are we celebrating today? Are you saying we're celebrating Father's Day?" Possibly. Are you saying we are celebrating the success of No King's Day, which yesterday brought out what some estimate to be 10 million people worldwide to express their frustration and protest the Trump administration? Are we celebrating that? Perhaps we are celebrating day 147, representing our completion of 10%. 10% of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. Well, guess what? It's all three. Now, speaking of Father's Day, I have to say that when I was growing up, the father figure in my life was not my father. It was a fictional father, or at least a fictionalized father, and that was Michael Landon as Charles Ingalls in Little House on the Prairie. Now, I don't know who the leader of the Trump administration looked up to as his father figure, because if it was his actual father, well, that would explain a thing or two about the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration. As we know, the father of the leader of the Trump administration was a dirty dude who did dirty deeds that resulted in the leader that we must now ignore, as well as the leader of the Trump administration's brother drinking himself to death, which is not something you want to do when you are celebrating. On a serious note, I am encouraged by yesterday's two public displays. Two public displays on the very same day, one which showed us without question how many of our fellow Americans have reached their limit with the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration. And at the exact same time, the Trump administration had to issue lies about the leader of the Trump administration's 79th birthday party parade's teeny tiny turnout. So yes, I do not mind celebrating 3 times. Discovering that we are 10% done with the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration's final term is something that is so lovely to learn. Yesterday's situation sent the message that the people of the nation are tired of the leader of the Trump administration. On Father's Day, don't be like his father. Don't die like his brother. Always celebrate in moderation and never forget to ignore the leader of the Trump administration. Day 148 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I am just trying to help myself. That is a Madonna reference. Jack comments, no, King's Day is actually on the 4th of July. Now, I had a little fun with Jack in the comments and replied, the 4th is Independence Day, to which he replied, independence from? And I said, Will Smith, in reference to that blockbuster film that he starred in. But then I realized that Jack was posing a very serious question, so I should respond to it seriously. So that is what I am doing here on day 148 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. Jack is referring to my video about last weekend's No King's Day, in which an estimated 10 million people came out around the world to protest the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration. And what Jack is saying is that America's independence from Great Britain, which is celebrated on July 4th, is the real No King's Day. Well, Jack, I agree that July 4th is in its way a No King's Day. I see what you are saying. But unfortunately, on last weekend's No King's Day, we were not celebrating the establishment of our country's independence from a king. We were protesting a president who is supposed to be working for us, but is instead attempting to be a king. I hope you understand the difference now, Jack. We don't want that. And you know how we don't want that? 10 million people protesting the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration versus about 10,000 people at the leader of the Trump administration's self-congratulatory parade, which he pretended was to honor the army when it was only to honor himself. Jack goes on to ask, will I be celebrating July 4th like most patriots? Well, first, Jack, you don't say what a patriot is, and I have to guess that you mean I can't be a patriot if I protest the leader of the Trump administration. Well, Jack, I saw plenty of American flags at No King's Day, plenty of ex-military, plenty of people who were there to celebrate America and our independence from rulers and would-be rulers, such as the leader of the Trump administration. So, in that case, I guess I am a patriot. However, you still do not specify what kind of celebration a patriot partakes in on July 4th. So for the sake of wrapping this up, I will decide that you mean burgers and fireworks. And with that, I would say, in this case, Jack, the answer is yes. So I hope I have cleared up your questions, Jack. But before I go, I want to let you know that I love that your username is Jack08544 because it rhymes with ignore the Trump administration. Day 149 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I am just trying to help myself. Have you heard about the 3.5% rule? This is a political science concept that shows that nonviolent protests are twice as likely to succeed as armed conflicts, and those nonviolent protests that engage a threshold of 3.5% of the population have never failed to bring about change. I believe that the 3.5% rule suggests that change is more likely to occur through nonviolent protest rather than force because people perceive persuasion as more legitimate than force. While it remains to be seen if the 3.5% rule will work to bring about the end of the Trump administration or is only the observation of a hard-working political scientist, I say whatever works to turn ignoring the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration into no longer needing to ignore the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration. We can witness persuasion as an effective means of change through simple one-on-one everyday interactions with the people around us, which is a non-political science observation by me, Josh Bloom, on day 149 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. One-on-one, I want to play that game tonight. Just like the duo of Daryl Hall and John Oates sang in their 1982 hit song. Ironically, Hall and Oates had a falling out in recent years. I hope they can patch it up. I'm not going to lie, I often find myself biting my tongue when I overhear a conversation that is littered with lies, and the reason I have to hold my tongue is that I want to use verbal force. Still, sometimes I have been lucky to be able to initiate a conversation and be able to say, can I give you my point of view? Can I offer what I know and what I've seen with my own eyes? Can I explain what I understand intrinsically about human behavior as a 53-year-old person? Sometimes when those conversations happen, mutual understanding is the result. And in those moments, I am astounded because I am not looking to win an argument. I am looking to enjoy my life in peace. And that is what everyone is trying to do. To accomplish that, we need to understand one another. And to understand one another, we need to understand that some people are never going to understand, but we do not need everyone to understand. The theory is that we only need 3.5%. The leader of the Trump administration is one of those people who will never understand. And that is why I have planned to continue to ignore the Trump administration. Day 150 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I am just trying to help myself. Do you know the song Barbara Ann, which was originally recorded by the Regents but popularized by the Beach Boys in 1965? Perhaps you know the song War with the lyric, "What is it good for?" The Temptations originally recorded this song, but it was popularized by Edwin Starr in 1969. Barbara Ann led to a parody version during the Iranian hostage crisis in 1980 called Bomb Iran. Isn't that funny? By now, you have probably put the pieces together and figured out what this has to do with the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration, which was originally elected in 2016 and unpopularized in 2024 by receiving less than 50% of the popular vote. You may have heard that the leader of the Trump administration is about to bring the United States into a brand new war. A brand new war with an old adversary from 1980 known as Iran. Why is he doing this? Well, he is very upset that fewer than 9,000 people attended his birthday parade last weekend. I can see how that would make the leader of the Trump administration want to bomb Iran. Breaking news. This is not what I want to discuss on day 150 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. As you know, I do not indulge in ceaseless information about the latest behavioral malfunction of the leader of the Trump administration. There is no point to that. When I see the leader of the Trump administration being called out as a hypocrite for engaging in speech and behavior that he has condemned in others, My reaction to that is duh. On the political stage, we are a decade into dealing with the leader of the Trump administration, and as a New Yorker, I will remind you that we have seen the actions of this diseased and deeply disturbed mind our whole lives. Unfortunately, news outlets, influencers are just the people around town spreading the lies that the leader of the Trump administration has filled their tank with, continue to collect money, followers, and the satisfaction of making other people's lives miserable because, like the leader of the Trump administration, they are also operating from a place of deep, deep, deep trauma. It doesn't serve their purposes to simply acknowledge that the leader of the Trump administration and therefore the Trump administration exists for one reason: to make other people hurt the way that they hurt. So, on day 150 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration, my suggestion to you is to enrich your soul by putting on some music by the Beach Boys and follow it up with some Temptations while you ignore the Trump administration. Day 151 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. Some people ask me, Josh, are you a self-help guru? And I always answer no. I am just trying to help myself. Whenever the leader of the Trump administration is done with his final term, and we elect Mayor Pete, AOC, or Gavin Newsom, for example, I think they should just leave the gold leaf he installed right where it is in the Oval Office. He loves gold. Leave the gold from Gold Mushroom member right there in the Oval Office. Just leave it. Because it sends a message, hey, we don't care. This is not a priority, and we're above his petty nonsense. Let's leave it there to remind people that this is what we lived through, this gaudy, tasteless administration. When I mention Mayor Pete, AOC, Gavin Newsom, you might be like, Mayor Pete, he's G-A-Y. AOC, she's a Hispanic woman. Gavin Newsom, he's a woke daddy with good hair. On that last one, I think it makes a lot of sense to run the dude who is going to make up for the hair crime that we have had to witness from the leader of the Trump administration, which happens to be one of his most substantial crimes. But when I say those people, you might think that they can't get elected because of those personality traits. And what I'm trying to say on day 151 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration is that it's not about those personality traits. If one of those people wins you over and captures your heart and mind, then that is what rules the day. In our real lives, we like a person because we like a person. We don't break them down and decide not to like them if we already like them because of superficial character traits that have nothing to do with us personally. I talked earlier this week about persuasion versus force. The reason the leader of the Trump administration barely won over Kamala Harris is because people felt they were forced to vote for her when she didn't have the time to persuade the tiny percentage of the electorate that she needed to persuade to win. In my opinion, on Juneteenth, it was not because she was a black woman. If she had had 6 months instead of 3 months, she would have won that additional 1.5% of the vote that she needed and that we needed. If a black woman, a Hispanic woman, a GAY man, or just some dude with decent hair is going to win the White House, it has to be because people want to vote for them because they like that person, because most people just vote for who they like. I like someone who is cool with just leaving the gold leaf where it is. If you can ignore the gold leaf, then you can ignore the Trump administration.
Hey, it's Josh. I'm back. If you thought the Austin Powers film Goldmember was a dud, try watching it again. It is just the right kind of dumb for me. Some would say it is in bad taste, but there is no taste as bad as installing gold leaf everywhere you go. Thanks again for listening. Please leave a 5-star rating for the Josh Bloom podcast in your podcast app and leave a comment saying you like the show. Don't forget to follow and, most importantly, tell a friend. Now, I realized today that when I say tell a friend, I may be excluding family members. For some, family members are not friends at all and are barely tolerable. If this is the case with you, why not use suggesting the Josh Bloom podcast as a way to mend fences? If it doesn't work, you can bond over hating me. I am totally fine with that if it brings broken families together. Lastly, visit me everywhere for everything by going to superjews.com. That's superjews.com for links to all of my social media, and visit superjews.substack.com to subscribe to my Substack, which contains all of my long-form writing. Subscriptions are free, or for a small monthly donation, you can support my work. It helps a lot. Thanks again for listening. I will see you next week.